He wanted to eat like a teenager. He he really wanted me to feed him hot dogs.
A dog won't eat his food, or much of anything else. What is he trying to tell his owner? That's in this episode of Rover Says, the podcast where we talk about the weird and wonderful things animals say when they open up to pet psychics. I'm your host, Nancy Aziz.
The Beamer is a 47-pound Vizsla. He's a Hungarian pointer. And so he's rust colored. He has very short fur, very short coat. And he's very muscular. He has a beautiful head. I think he has a very, very sweet face, beautiful eyes. They're very expressive. His eyes they match his coat. So they're kind of a deep brown.
What do you love about him? Like, what's his personality? Does he like to play ball? Is he spunky?
He's very playful. Play is his game. He's either very, very playful or he's very serious. He's got kind of a switch that he turns on and off.
That's Schullie. Her dog Beamer, who's now 8, pretty much stopped eating when he was about 16 months old.
And he was in the kitchen eating from a food bowl, and his mother was there eating. And all of a sudden, he looked up and he sat down and he stopped eating. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought, well, maybe he's sick. He didn't show any signs of illness. So we started trying different foods. And over the period of time for the next 6 weeks after that, mm-hmm. he lost about 20% of his body weight.
Oh.
No matter what we tried to do, you pick the bowl up. He can go 2 or 3 meals without eating anything.
Wow. That must have been scary.
It's scary when it's a young dog. Mm-hmm. And, developmentally, he wasn't, fully developed yet. So it took on some urgency because he wasn't overweight to begin with. So he was getting dangerously thin.
Julie took him to 2 vets who couldn't find anything wrong with Beamer. She tried everything she could think of to coax him to eat. She changed his food again and again. She heated it up. She tried stuffing treats into dog toys and puzzles.
We were pretty much cornering the market on all the toys that you could get to play with a dog to get him to eat, because if we could play with him, he would eat some. Mm-hmm. And it was taking upwards of an hour and a half a day of my time to play with him to get him to eat what little he did eat, and he was still losing all this weight.
Julie knew the little he was consuming was barely enough, and a friend recommended an animal communicator. It wasn't Julie's first time. She had an experience with one some 20 years prior.
I had a dog that just was not responding to conventional medicine and not getting better, and had some sort of something going on, but nobody could figure out what it was. And a friend suggested that I see this holistic vet. So I started seeing this holistic vet. And she turned out to profess to be an animal communicator as well. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was very, very skeptical about animal communication. But whatever she was doing with the holistic approach and what she was prescribing for him was working. So I kept going back to her. And I remember going in one day, and this particular dog of mine had had a fear of walking past our neighbor's house. And I told her about it. I said, he will not, we have to cross the street. We can't walk directly in front of this neighbor's house. And she paused for a moment and she was talking to him telepathically. And she came back and she said, well, he's afraid of your neighbor. And I said, well, he's never met that neighbor. He doesn't know those people. And then there was another pause, and she said, the dog that lives there. And I said, well, they don't have a dog. I said, and then all of a sudden the light bulb went off. And I said, well, there was a dog that lived there that used to be a bully to him, but he moved away years ago. And another pause, she talked to him. And she said, he said that one of your other dogs had seen him and that he was back in the neighborhood. And I remembered that my old neighbor had come by, had him in the back of her car, and that my dog that was friends with him went out and saw him, Holly, and came in and told the other one, apparently, that Rocky was back in the neighborhood. And at that point, I was sort of like, nobody could make this up. There's something to this. And I kind of set it aside, didn't really think about it for a number of years until I ran into the issue with Beamer being a picky eater.
This time, Julie called on animal communicator Lynn Schuster to try and get Beamer eating again.
Lynn, so do you remember your first conversation with Beamer regarding the food, and what did he say?
Yeah, so I talked to Beamer. The way I always begin my conversations, especially when it's our first meeting, it's like meeting a new person. I don't go up to somebody on the street and start a conversation. So I had Beamer's information from Julie, and I start by visualizing his picture in my mind's eye, stating my intention is to speak with him. And when I see him moving or animated in my mind's eye, I know I have a connection. And from there, we have a conversation similar to what humans do. I told him, the first thing I told him was who I am, and that I'm Julie's friend, and that she invited me to have this conversation, and that I was really happy to meet him. And then the other thing that I did immediately was start just sharing love with him, just opening my heart and breathing and just starting a really slow conversation. And I told him, I think our conversation is about your eating habits, and that your mom really wants to know why, how we can help you with food. And so at first he was very shy. He didn't quite know if he wanted to talk to me. So I told him a little bit about myself and where I live and what my life is like. And he slowly opened up a little bit more to me. And he basically told me what his needs were. Like Julie said, he wanted hot dogs.
Lynn explained that eating hot dogs as a steady diet wasn't an option, and she asked him what a perfect meal would look like besides hot dogs. She asked him if he wanted a bowl or a plate. Did he want to continue to eat in the kitchen or somewhere else? They talked about the consistency of the food and whether it was better out of the fridge or room temp.
He told me about the temperature of the food. He said he wanted it mouse temperature. And he knew I would understand what that means because I have cats. And so mouse temperature is the body temperature of a mouse. which is a kind of lukewarm. It's warm but not hot. He didn't want it. He didn't want it cold, like out of the refrigerator. He wanted it mouse temperature, and so I thought that was a really good analogy about how he wanted his food. He eats it raw, but how he wanted it cooked. Not literally cooked, but served, I guess, would be how he wanted his meal served at mouse temperature. So that cracked me up. I thought it was really funny, and I knew that we were starting to really engage in conversation, and his personality was starting to bloom then. We were becoming really good friends at that point, because our conversations had really lightened up, and so we were really having more. It was our conversations were becoming more intimate.
This happened over the course of many sessions. Lynn says eventually Beamer opened up, and that's when she learned the food issue wasn't just about food.
It was stage fright. He was afraid to get on the stage.
For Beamer, that was an agility course.
And so he thought if he didn't eat, maybe he wouldn't have to go to agility. And so we began a long conversation about agility. Does he like agility? What scares him about agility? Is if he doesn't want to go, he won't have to go. He can just be on the farm and just be a dog and run and play on the farm. So that's how we began our conversation.
Julie says finding out that Beamer had stage fright made a lot of sense.
We would go to agility class and he would be so unfocused and sniffing the ground, which I was a sign of stress, that I literally would have to carry a toy around to try and get him to do a course, and then just heavily praise him and that sort of thing.
Julie had thought about quitting agility with Beamer, but she kept trying because his mother and sister went regularly and loved it, and she didn't want to leave Beamer at home without them. So Lynn dug deeper. What did Beamer want to do?
Yes, it kind of unraveled. We unraveled the conversation. And what it boiled down to was he really likes doing agility. He just didn't have the confidence.
Lynn set out to give him that confidence.
I would tell him that our imagination is really important. And if we can imagine how we would like to run that course, it will help us in the physical world. So he did like to, he would get nervous and he would start sniffing, and he would start doing nose work out on the agility course. And so we talked about sniffing first before he went out on the course, sniffing and feeling into it and feeling his confidence, and then go out on the course and focus on Julie, his handler. Focus on her and nobody else. It's just you and Julie. And we would run courses in our mind's eye, and we would build. I let him build the course because I am not an actual handler. I haven't ever done that physically, and so I watched from the audience, but I let Beamer create his course. And so we would run the course several times in my mind's eye. The other thing that happened when we were talking one day, it was right before Julie had me connect with him, right before he was going to go on the course. And so I had his schedule, and I was at home, and Julie and Beamer were at the dog show, or wherever they were, that was taking place. And I started singing to him in my mind's eye from The Greatest Showman. This is me. And part of the words are, look out because here I come. I'm marching onto the beat of the drum, something like that. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. I'm not going to sing it for you because I am not I am not a gifted singer, but I do know the words because I love that song, and I can relate to it, and I can feel my own, my own trepidations, my own little fears release when I sing that song to myself. And so that became our theme song, and I think he did a really good job with that. It was quite fun.
He literally has shifted his energy to the point where he now draws energy from watching other dogs run.
Mhm.
And the higher their energy, he uses that to create his energy. I mean, it's an amazing transformation. He is now at the point where he really doesn't care to perform in class. He craves the spotlight. He only wants to go to agility trials. And he just absorbs all that energy and puts everything into the course.
It must feel pretty good to be able to help people and their animals. And you must, I would imagine you get a lot of joy from that.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I am living a dream life. The animals bring me so much joy. And what I've learned from them, I learn from them every time I talk to them. They are right here in the moment. Their main cause for life is love. Their job is to help humans open their hearts. And when I'm speaking with them, and it's happening right now as I talk about it, I feel my heart opening and love just pouring through, which when there's love in my heart, there is no room for fear.
Mm-hmm.
Everything feels in right divine order. And then that's what the animals bring to me.
The change in Beamer didn't happen overnight. Lynn says it often takes a bit, but his hunger strike and stage fright are now a thing of the past, and what Julie saw compelled her to learn more about animal communication. Now she practices it herself. And after working together remotely for 2 years, Lynn finally got to meet Beamer.
I was in Chicago for work, and Julie brought Beamer to meet me, and we had been talking at that point. We were really good friends at that point. And Julie and Beamer walked in the room, and we closed the door, and Beamer was walking around the outside at the edge of the room, and he did not acknowledge me one bit. And Julie and I were quite amazed that he wasn't jumping all over me and loving on me and licking my face. And I was too. I was kind of disappointed. and so I started talking to him, and he looked at me, and I heard him say, "I thought you were a radio station in my head. I didn't know you were real." And I thought, oh yes, I've had pictures of him, but he's never had pictures of me. And then he said, "And you're so young. I thought you'd be older because you're very wise." So it was just a really fun conversation that we had when we met in person. And about 10 minutes into our conversation, he was wanting to sit on my lap. He's not a lap dog, but he was so happy to see me, and I in turn was very, very happy to see him as well. And so that really brought our relationship even closer and deeper.
Thanks so much for listening to Rover Says. If you like the show, please rate it and share so other people who want to know how animals really think can find us. And we'd like to hear from you. Tell us what your animals are telling you or what they've told animal communicators. We drop new episodes every other Wednesday.